Hello and welcome everyone to today's Fairygodboss webinar. We're so excited to have you all here. We're going to give folks just a couple more seconds to connect. And while we are doing so, would love to see where everyone's joining. I can see a few of you who've already started dropping that in. So on the right side of your screen, there's a chat box. Feel free to drop a message saying hi. Let us know where you're joining from. I see we've got some folks from all over the East Coast over there, Ohio, DC, love it. I know there's more of you out there. Utah, hey, I'm a Utahn as well, Crystal. So glad we're right up the street from each other. Very nice. Oh, there we go. We're starting to see it trickle in all over the place. Oh, Mexico. First one outside of the States. Love that. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. Feel free to continue dropping that in, say hi, and communicate with each other as we go through this. Wanted to just introduce myself. My name's Dani Foust. I'm our head of talent acquisition here at Pluralsight. Been with the company for about 7 years, done a number of career pivots myself, which was the purpose of what we're going to talk about today. But before we get started, just a couple of quick announcements. This session will be recorded and shared via email with all of you, as well as any registrants who weren't able to make it. And during the discussion, we'd love to hear from you. So as I mentioned, use the side chat. There's a chat feature as well as a Q&A tab. If you've got specific questions for the panelists, we'll pull those out as we go. For those who don't know, Fairygodboss is the largest online career community for women. So millions of women visit this place for career connections, jobs, advice, hard to find intel about how companies are treating and working with women, as well as for virtual events like this. So we're very excited to partner with them for an event, especially talking about something as impactful as this. So excited to kick off today's event, where we're going to be talking about finding your next move, strategies for a successful career pivot, sponsored by Pluralsight. I am so excited to have my two colleagues with me, Courtney and Heather, both of which I've worked with for a while now, and I'm glad to be able to have this conversation with them, step outside of work a little bit. So would love if each of you can maybe take a minute and introduce yourself, tell us what's going on in your life, personally, professionally, what you do at Pluralsight. So Heather, why don't we start with you?
That sounds great. Thanks, Dani. Yes, my name is Heather MacDonald. I am currently the Director of Consulting Services with Pluralsight. I've actually been with the organization for almost 4 years now, and I am currently working remote out of the Salt Lake Valley in Utah. Actually, early in my career, I felt like my winding path was absolutely a failing on my part. I felt like the fact that I had been jumping across sectors and roles and different industries was something that I was doing wrong. And I constantly wondered, like, where would I be if I had just, picked a major, stuck with it, finished that off, and then pursued a career like normal people. But over time, I realized that winding path is actually what makes me really great at the work that I do and has benefited me so much in my day-to-day. So in my work at Pluralsight, we help teams, we help work with our customers to overcome some of their most complex learning challenges. But in my personal life, I actually love working with folks to help them overcome burnout and career transitions, because it's something I've done and lived through. And I feel there's power in working together to solve for these things. So I believe that when we learn to navigate our careers from a place of our personal values and the things that matter the most to us personally, we actually open doors to the right opportunities that we need for our lives that are just perfect for us. So beyond that, I'm a wife and mom to 2 amazing kiddos, a pet parent, yoga practitioner, car enthusiast, and coffee lover. So that's me.
I love those facts. And so fun. What pet do you have, Heather? Do you have multiple?
I do. I have a German Shepherd. She's amazing and delightful and a little bit chaotic. We had 3 cats. One passed this year, but we still have 2 cats with us. So cats and dogs in our family.
Very nice. Very nice. Love it. Awesome. All right, Courtney, over to you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Ziegenbusch. I work remotely from Ohio as a principal Salesforce administrator with Pluralsight. So over the course of my career, I've made several career pivots, all within the technology space. Started off in sales operations, moved into a product ownership role, then into a business systems analyst role, still supporting sales, eventually into a Salesforce administrator. I did a people leadership role for a little bit, and then I actually just moved back into that principal Salesforce administrator role. And the fun thing is, like, each shift has given me a new perspective on how technology and business comes together. And it's taught me a lot about navigating change and kind of leaning into the transferable skills. Outside of work, like Heather said, I love coffee as well. And I'm a mom of two kids, two dogs, and one cat. Actually, also a mom to a snapping turtle right now, but hoping to release that thing soon. But I'm excited to be here today and just to share some of the strategies that have helped me make those transitions successfully, and hopefully just to encourage anyone who's considering a career pivot of their own to go for it.
I love that, Courtney. And one of the things you mentioned, spoiler alert, I do want to come back to it. Courtney's decision to move from a people leader role back into an individual contributor role is one of the things that I don't think we talk about enough. And I think that's one of the things, Courtney, that we'll circle back to that in this discussion, but is a really cool conversation to have around people leadership in this as well. So thank you both. Excited about the discussion today. We've got a few questions we're gonna walk through, folks. But again, reminder that we will go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A. We're gonna get to as many of your questions directly as well, and we'll do our best to respond to those. So for starters, Heather and Courtney, I mean, career pivots can be really stressful and a little bit overwhelming for folks. So what strategies helped you kind of maintain some of that balance while you were making some of these career changes? And Courtney, maybe we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, absolutely. To start off, I mean, I'm a pretty high strung person to begin with. So stress is kind of always underlining in my life. But so to do a career pivot, they have been stressful to some degree, and especially the ones where you're doing a career pivot and you're joining a new company. Because in those situations, you're not just learning a new role, you're also figuring out the new culture and building new relationships. But what helped me keep my balance was just giving myself permission to be a beginner again, right? I focused on being curious, learning as much as I could. And again, I'm high strung, so I have really high expectations for myself a lot of times. And I try to lower those, just from my output and what I'm getting done, give myself some time to learn and grow with this new company and be less focused on, how much I'm outputting, to my new role. So I also leaned on mentors a lot. I carved out time again to build those new skills for the new role. But honestly, my biggest piece of advice, which I don't always follow, but I keep in the back of my mind, is try not to make other major life changes at the same time if you can avoid it, right? Keep your routines outside of work the same or as steady as possible. Because that foundation, right, having those things steady while you're kind of having this chaos of changing careers or pivoting roles, it's going to make it a lot easier, to go ahead and handle that pivot.
I love that. I think it's really important to find it. You said that beautifully, Courtney, of there's a balance. And if you overdo it on all sides, then it becomes more overwhelming and more stressful than it needs to be. So yes, I love that. Heather, what would be your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think early in my career, the pivots I made were absolutely not intentional. It was, who's hiring for the season? What job can I get? Is it going to pay me $2 more an hour? It was just wherever I could figure something out. But at some point in my career, I started to actually get really intentional. And I started to ask myself a set of questions every time I was thinking, like, even if it was just like, maybe I don't love my job, but maybe I don't really want to go looking. I started to just ask some questions of myself to see, like, okay, like, what matters to me at this point in time? And what I realized in this self-reflection was I could start to understand, okay, is it the job? Is it my boss? Is it the company? And sometimes the answer would be like, actually, I'm really happy here. Maybe I just need to adjust my role so I could be a little happier and have new things to, take on and learn from. Other times it was like, actually, this isn't the right fit for me. The job's wrong, the boss is wrong, something's wrong, and it's time to move on. But in getting really intentional, I started to understand what mattered the most to me so that when I chose to move to something else, it was intentional and targeted for what I wanted next in my career. And I really appreciate what Courtney said too about like that stepping back. I've technically stepped back multiple times in my career because the thing that I was going to was the best fit for me at the time. So I've gone from, like a senior director role to a program coordinator role. I've gone from a VP role to a consulting role. But each time it was with the specific intention to get something I wanted for my career. And what I've realized is like, there is no wrong answer. So if anybody is here and is like, oh, I feel like I'm not doing the right things, as long as you're willing to learn from wherever you're going, there's still something to be benefited from that.
I love that perspective, Heather. And I think one of the things you both actually kind of hinted at this, and I think this is a really prevalent topic, and I know it's kind of a buzzword right now, but as you're trying to balance some of these things, there's a lot of competing priorities. I see some things in the chat around, there's sometimes where some of this isn't an option. And you have like these career pivots come upon you. You don't choose them all the time, right? And so it can be really easy to fall into a state of burnout, right? So how do you avoid some of that burnout when you're working or when you have competing priorities outside of work that are happening, again, that you have no control over? You're job searching, you're trying to find this balance. How do you personally avoid some of that burnout? And Heather, we'll switch it and start with you.
Sure. So this wasn't related to like a job search thing, but actually last year I burned out hard. I ended up having to take 6 weeks off of work. I was super grateful that Pluralsight had that benefit where I could take that time to take care of myself. But what I've realized from that, and now like I'm a year out from burnout basically at this point, what I've realized is it requires intention and ongoing care. It's one of those things that if you just keep putting it off, and especially I think like as a working mom, as just somebody who always wants to be really great at the work I do, if you keep saying no to yourself, at some point you will burn out regardless of what's going on. So it can be really challenging to make sure that, like you have to prioritize yourself as you're going along. And I've realized there's different career seasons. So for some of us, we might be in a position where, we're all in, we're taking on all the opportunities, we're saying yes to everything. But for other people, it might be a season of, when your kids are little, it's so hard to be all about everything. Sometimes you have to slow down and be intentional about what you're doing so that you can actually just navigate that space you're in. It's like Courtney had said, is like, you kind of have to figure out like, what's that balance as you're going on. And it can be really hard to say, like, how am I going to do all of these things at once? But the thing is, like, we can't do everything at once. We have to prioritize. We have to figure out where we're going to focus on. And sometimes it really is just about saying, you know what, in this season of life, I need to step back, or I need to get into something that's going to be a better fit for me to be able to, make it through this time frame that I'm in. But really just looking at yourself and listening to what you need and not ignoring that. I think that's one of the things that's really helped me navigate this the most.
I love that, Heather. And I want to double click on something before we shift to Courtney. You mentioned a couple of things that I think are really important, which is very good self-awareness, right, of what you needed and when you needed it. But you mentioned, and I don't even think you meant to, the idea of boundaries, right? And that is oftentimes where we can find some of this balance and avoid some of this burnout. So you mentioned a couple of examples, but what were some of the boundaries that you had set for yourself? And did you see some of that positive impact?
Yeah, the interesting thing is when I realized I was heading towards burnout, number one for me, what it felt like, it was like I was really paranoid about everything. Everything was like, oh, they're going to use that against me, or, they don't want me to be successful. Like stuff that is like so out of character for me. I'm usually very optimistic, like cautiously optimistic. Sometimes stuff is challenging, but I started to get that way. I was exhausted all the time. I just was struggling on the day-to-day just to do the basic things that I knew how to do. For me, some of the boundaries were like, I realized I had to ask for help. Like I would go to my boss and be like, hey, I'm struggling. I need help. I actually had some of my team members be like, can I take that off your plate? Like, let me work with you on this. Let me, take on that client. You can be behind the scenes and we'll just work together. Some of it was also knowing that like on some days, 5 o'clock hits and it's like, I'm out. Like I've got to go refresh. I've got to be with my kids. I've got to take some time for myself. And some of it was also saying no. Like as a people pleaser, perfectionist, overthinker, I want to say yes to everything. I want to make everybody happy. But I realized at some points, like part of it was like, I can't do everything for everyone if I am not in a place to take care of myself. So I had to start realizing like sometimes I sit on my hands to be like, I'm not raising my hand for this. Like this opportunity can be for someone else. I can let it pass because there will always be something else. And I needed that time to take care of myself. But yeah, setting boundaries, honestly, for me as a people pleaser was so hard to do, but I've realized it's critical to surviving and thriving in the world today.
I love that perspective. Thank you, Heather. All right. So, Courtney, flipping over to you, talk to me about your burnout and kind of boundary space that you've set while you're navigating this.
Yeah. So, thinking about burnout for me, I've luckily, like I said before, I've not ever been in a position where it's like a do or die thing for getting a job, right? I've been really, really fortunate that all of my career pivots were kind of planned on my behalf. And so for me, trying to balance a full-time job while either job searching or considering a career pivot, I had to be really careful to kind of treat that as a side project, right? So I didn't go all in. I didn't spend all of my time on it. I just set really clear boundaries. I set aside specific times during the week to update my resume, apply for jobs or network. And it helped me to really focus on the roles that I was interested in, right? Which is a complete shift from, I've been laid off, or, I really need a job, or this is like an unhealthy environment for me, right? So obviously those things don't apply when you're in like that type of situation. But again, the quality has always mattered to me over like quantity when it comes to, applications, right? Instead of sending 100 out, I'm like, okay, which ones am I actually interested in? And this is really cliche, but like I'm a big believer in like if the role is meant for me, it will work out. That doesn't mean I don't prepare. It doesn't mean I don't put in effort, but I use that to take the pressure that I'm not enough, right? I try to stay grounded, knowing my worth, and that if a company or an interviewer can't see that, and they can't see past me fumbling a question in an interview, or maybe something I might have missed adding on my resume. If they, can't get my true self out of that interview and see that I'm a great fit, then it probably isn't a great fit. And again, that is with the lens of, being able to be picky and looking for that pivot. That is not the same for, like what everyone's kind of putting in the chat there, where, a lot of people are, really looking for a job, and it's something that they need from a survival standpoint. So from that standpoint, I would probably lean a little bit more towards, you can't be as picky, and you just try to find a job that aligns best with what you want to do in the future. And, yeah.
Yeah, baby steps, right? Like sometimes it doesn't have to be the full pivot at once. Finding some of those small pieces that give you, one of you mentioned transferable skills, or
Yeah.
gives you access to a different network or a different industry, et cetera, right? Like slowly working yourself. Career pivot doesn't have to be a straight right turn, right? It can be a slow moving process. I love that, Courtney.
Absolutely. Like when I took one of my first jobs, it wasn't something that I ideally wanted, and it was a minimum wage position, but it got my foot in the door.
Yeah.
And I was able to learn those foundational functional skills. And then it allowed me to move into that product owner role, right? Because I really crushed my initial role. And they all built on top of each other. But if I would have been really picky about my first role, I would have never learned some of those foundational or transferable skills that still help me today. So
I love that. On the subject of boundaries, like we talked about with Heather, you've mentioned a couple things, right? Treating it like a project, setting aside time. You talked about setting aside time with mentors and like people in your network, et cetera. Anything else you'd add to the boundary side of like actual tangible things you set aside to help you navigate some of that burnout?
yeah, the big one that I kind of think of too is a lot of my pivots have been done internally, right? I've moved roles within the company I'm already at. And the biggest thing that I can say is, clarifying expectations with my manager and my teammates. Because when you're moving in those different roles, right? It's hard sometimes to say, okay, I'm no longer doing this, right? To find balance between I'm helping mentor the teammate taking over my old role, right? And still retaining some of that work. And you also don't want to micromanage the new person coming in. And so I just always say Heather talked about this too, speak up before you burn out, right? Be open with your manager and teammates about any struggles you're having with the transition or just in general, right? If you're just in general burning out in your role, try to be honest with your teammates and your managers if you feel like it's a safe space to do that. because it'll make that process smoother for everyone. And it just helps maintain the balance. It lets people know where you're at. So yeah, those are my two boundaries are, just being really upfront with what my work is and being really honest with where I'm at personally.
Love that. Thank you. Before we there's a shift here that I want to go through around the tactical pieces of transitioning in, like how you actually do some of this. We're still kind of on this subject of getting to that point or mentally working through some of this pieces. And we've got a couple great questions in the Q&A that I want to jump to that I think kind of tie more closely to this. Both of you have mentioned either unintentional or intentional career pivot decisions, some of it within your control, some of it internally. Some of it maybe not necessarily decisions that you made, but companies did or leaders forced, et cetera. And maybe you don't have exact personal experience, but would love some of your advice or take on a couple of these questions. So the first one I found is interesting around making a career pivot can sometimes, Courtney, you mentioned, be a step back, right? It can be a minimum role, a minimum wage role, or in my experience, I took a massive pay cut to shift into my first career pivot, if you will. That sometimes is very difficult for folks to do when you need an income or your family is relying on those pieces. So what advice or what have you all seen to make this career pivot, chase your dreams, but also balance some of the reality of why we all work? So I don't know if either one of you want to take a stab at this one first. Heather, maybe we'll jump to you if you've got any thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, the interesting thing is because I've hopped like industries and sectors so many times, like I've been really fortunate that when I've pivoted, I've still like, even if in title it looked like a step back, or even in responsibility it was a step back, I was still able to increase my pay, even if it was incrementally, or in some cases significantly. I think sometimes it's easy to say, well, like, oh, I've been in the nonprofit sector, I'm going to stay in the nonprofit sector. When I went from a senior director to a program coordinator, I went from nonprofit to banking. And banking is known for not being like the best paying place. Like they're really stable. A lot of times if you get in banking, people have, 30, 40-year careers. But still for me, from going from nonprofit to banking, it was still a decent increase for me. And then when I went from banking into tech, again, it was a step back from a VP role to a consultant, but it was still an opportunity to like increase my pay, even if the title like on paper might have looked like it was a step back. I think part of that is doing that reflection to understand what do I want and where can I find it, and being open to the possibilities. I think the lovely thing is in my nonprofit work, I ended up connecting with people across dozens of different types of companies and sectors. So I would do those kind of like informational interviews or coffee chats, or I'd be like, tell me about your work. Tell me about your industry. What are you doing over there? Where could I find a fit? So sometimes it was actually looking into something completely unrelated, but my skill set aligned, that made it so that I could make that transition. And I will absolutely say like having a really strong network was key along the way to helping me to get to where I wanted to go without always having to be that massive pay cut or step back. Like I get it. If you have the ability to take the pay cut for something great, because, you're escaping a toxic boss, or maybe you've got a partner that can help support you through it. Awesome if you can do that. But if not, don't lose hope. I think sometimes it takes a little bit more exploring to find the right thing, but the possibilities are out there.
Right. And to our earlier conversation, right? It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to take a massive pay cut here, take a left turn, right? It can slowly but surely build the network you need, change an industry, make a slow move to that so that it doesn't dramatically impact that financial aspect. I love that, Heather. Courtney, anything you'd add that before we move on?
No, just to kind of reiterate what Heather said. I mean, don't be afraid to take, those changes. Again, everyone's situation is differently, but with my latest pivot, right, moving out of management and into an individual role, again, I went through, Heather already touched on this too, where I kind of asked myself questions like, what do I enjoy doing? What makes me happy? What fits with my stage of life right now? I have little kids, right? I need the flexible schedule in some cases. And so, I focused on all of those things, and I was very prepared, for a pay cut, right? Or a lateral move. And I was okay with that because I made peace with it. It fit our home lifestyle. It was fine. And surprising to me, I actually ended up getting a decent raise, right? And so, you have to prepare yourself for, I won't want to say worst case scenario, but be okay with the outcomes that, okay, I'm doing what's best for me. It may not be best financially at this moment, but in the long run, I knew I would make up, anything that I had lost. I knew I had other opportunities. But as Heather said, sometimes, taking a step back doesn't always mean you're going to take that cut. So don't count it out, right? Don't say, oh, if I do this, I'm absolutely, taking a pay cut. At least explore the option and see what's out there.
I love that. That's fantastic advice. Perfect. Well, let's shift for a second. We've talked a little bit about the situational piece, but let's talk tactical for a second. And starting at the very beginning of this, when you all decided I need a career pivot or you're starting for a new role, how did you identify what you wanted next out of that next role, out of that career path? What did that look like for you? Courtney, I'll let you start here.
Yep. And so I kind of just touched on this, right? I asked myself questions: what type of role matches my work-life balance needs? What kind of problems do I enjoy solving? What skills do I want to grow next, right? So sometimes the career pivots are, I'm not growing in this role, or, I really want to learn this, so I need to transfer into a different role to be able to do that. And then from there, I look for roles that align with those answers. And I also try not to force myself into a specific mold. I'll pay attention to moments in my past that really energized me, right? Made me excited to work. And I just as equally pay attention to things that drained me, right? Where I was getting close to burnout, or I was burned out, or I was just grumpy because I wasn't happy with the work I was doing, right? And I wasn't showing up for others how I wanted to. And doing those things gave me a really clear picture of, what roles I wanted and what roles I wanted to avoid. And another thing that I love is, again, leaning on mentors. I've luckily had some mentors who have, been around the block, worked in different industries, seen different roles. And when I would have open, candid conversations with them about what I was looking for, they'd be like, oh, well, you would probably like this. And it would be a role that I had literally never heard of. And I, would go do my Googling, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, this does sound really great. And so again, really try to find those mentors, have those conversations with people in your industry or the industry you're trying to transfer to, because sometimes the general roles that are out there, there are more out there than that, right? There are more specialized niche roles that you can find, and that might really, really fit you well.
Love that. Heather?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what Courtney said. Like the kind of three sets of questions I ask myself are about what I want as a person. So individually, what do I want? What do I need based on the current season of life I'm in? What do I want out of a workplace? Like, so is it fully remote? Is it hybrid? Is it something close? Am I willing to move? Like, what type of boss do I want? What type of executive team do I want to work for? And then what do I want out of my life? So like Courtney said, it's what problems do I want to solve? What am I energized by? Like, what is the impact that I want to have, especially as like I'm advance in my career? To me, it becomes more about having an impact and making a difference than early in my career where it was just like, I need more money, I need the title, I need to move up, because at that point it's like you are trying to survive and trying to live your life. So I think those kind of buckets are what helps me tactically figure out what I want. I think the other big thing is, and Courtney touched on this, is really like cultivating your network. Like the switch that happened for me, because I used to think that networking was strictly, it was for salespeople and for people who wanted to get something from other people. Like I just kind of saw it as kind of scummy, like, ew, like why would I want to do that? But when I actually had that mindset shift to realize networking is about building your support community, that's when it clicked for me that it was like, oh, I don't have to go in with the expectation of give me, give me, give me. I can go in with the expectation of what can I give? How can we learn together? How can we mutually support each other? And that's when, like, just same thing as Courtney, like I had people who would be like, oh my gosh, you'd be perfect for this type of role. Or, oh, have you talked to somebody in this industry? I highly encourage people, like, look at your network and start diversifying that like crazy. Like if everyone in your network is people you've worked with before at companies you don't want to go back to working for, start branching out, new industries, people with different backgrounds, different lived experiences. The more diverse your network is, the better information and insights you're going to get from it. And then, yeah, like Courtney did, like when you reach out to somebody and you have that conversation, they can open up doors that you didn't even know existed. Like sometimes it really is like, oh, there's this whole other industry that does this. Wait a minute, that's exactly what I want to do. So I always encourage people, like, get out there, find ways to network. And I love introvert friendly networking too. Like just even go in and comment on people's posts, like build that relationship slowly over time. It makes such a difference.
I love that. And that actually leads perfectly to a question that was asked in the chat, Heather and Courtney. So I'm going to jump over here for a second. For folks who may be changing industries or looking to relocate, or maybe they're completely changing the type of role that they're looking for, right? They may not have a network that's built in some of those places. And so how do you find a mentor or build some of that network, Heather, to your point, that if you don't know anyone in that field yet, it can feel like Heather's point, cold calling. You can reach out to people on LinkedIn, but it doesn't always feel as natural or as easy. Any tips or tricks that you guys have found that have worked really well in building a new network or branching into a new space? Either
Oh,
of you.
totally.
Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I think one of the things is start with the current network you have. Like, even if you talk to somebody that's already a friend, that's at least a friendly face, ask them, I'm trying to get into this type of network or this type of space. Who could you recommend? And even if it just gets you one step closer to that industry, you just keep kind of walking down the pathway to get closer and closer to the people in your network. I'd say the other thing is, if you are truly starting from scratch, like maybe you're super early career, maybe you really don't have a network of people who also know people, like get on LinkedIn and just start building a presence. And it doesn't have to be like you posting all the time. Follow the people who are thought leaders in the industry or job you're trying to get into. Comment on their post. What you'll find is you can start to connect with people they're connected to. And that's how you can start building your network really quickly in a space that you maybe don't know anybody in. So like, yeah, you might be posting on an Adam Grant post and Adam Grant is probably not responding to you personally, but the people in there, you have a shared interest in what you're talking about. There's other people who probably want to network. I have made some awesome connections in the comment section of other people's posts. And again, like to me, this is introvert friendly networking 101. Like you don't have to be the one posting. You can totally like play in the space off of other people's posts because it helps support them, but also you can start to meet new people that maybe you wouldn't meet otherwise.
I love that. Great advice, Heather. Courtney, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done, again, a shift from the industry, but like what Heather said is I've relied on my network that I have built from people that I've made really good relationships, from my past companies. And again, sometimes it's just sharing, hey, I'm not happy in my role, or hey, I'm looking, do you have any connections, right? I mean, I wouldn't ask it like that, but a lot of time I've had multiple people that I've worked with in the past where they're like, oh my gosh, I've just talked to this person and they have a role open that they don't have posted yet, right? Or they don't use LinkedIn because they're a small company. Can I get you, like, do you want me to put you in touch with them? Absolutely, right? And so just by continuing to have those conversations and to be open, right? I'm not generally posting on LinkedIn like, again, because I'm not looking for a job or I'm not, I wasn't affected by a riff, but I just start to have those conversations. And sometimes the conversations aren't even because I'm looking for a job. It's just that I want to use my network to kind of think through my thoughts and say, I'm having this unhappy season right here. I'm really having a hard time with this. Do you have any perspective on it? Right. And sometimes they just give me perspective on, step back, it's not always greener on the other side. And sometimes they're like, hey, maybe you need to change. Have you, here's this person you can talk to. So like Heather said, I really, really use my network, if I'm in a time of struggling or looking for a role.
Perfect. Fantastic advice from both of you. And the chat agrees with some of that perspective. So thank you. Heather, specific calls out for introverted networking, right? Like those of us that do not, when I see networking event or reception dinner, I'm like, I think I have the flu that night. I won't be able to be there. So couldn't agree more that finding what works for you to build that network. It doesn't have to look the same as the person next to you, and find a way to make that flow very naturally. Love it. Well, what tools have helped you outside of mentoring? We've spent a lot of time on the network, on building your network, finding some of those mentorship pieces, which are, again, very key and crucial to this. Have there been other things that have helped you guys clarify these goals as you start to look for a new job or look for a career shift? Other things around journaling or assessments or things like that that have helped kind of drive that path forward. Heather, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think part of it is this deep self-reflection. Like you can tell I'm like into all the self-help, help me be better, like help me understand myself better. But I think part of that is also that lifelong learning practice. I think number one, like just given how the world is, like you're going to have to constantly learn. We are no longer in a time where it's like go to school, get a degree, work 25 to life at a company and retire. That's just not part of the playbook anymore. I think career advancement really is going to look like learning, but also is applying. I think part of it too is when we think about a pivot, it's super scary and there's a lot of questions because we've never done the thing. If you can find ways to learn something and put it into practice, whether it's, I'm going to build a portfolio, I'm going to volunteer for an organization and try to use these skills, you won't really know if you're going to love the thing you're going to until you actually like dip a toe in the water and see what that looks like. So sometimes it's like, don't feel like you have to make the 10-year decision to go back to school and get a PhD and do all this. Like, what's the small decision? What's the 10-minute decision that can see if you even have interest of going down that path? Like, it's sometimes with careers, like for most of us, the sky is the limit. You could do anything in theory, but what's reasonable and feasible for you? So like, look at what's out there, start narrowing down your options, because sometimes just eliminating things that maybe aren't the best fit today can help you narrow down to a scope that's reasonable to tackle, where it's going to feel less scary and less confusing to have to dig through all of that.
Great thought. Courtney, any other tools or tricks that you've used?
Yeah, my big thing is just like to get my thoughts out, right? So I've used journaling, right? Where I'm just I'm going through and I'm really trying to get to the bottom of the thought, right? If I'm struggling with this or I'm excited about this, I mean, usually it is more of a struggle, right? I'm literally just writing all of my thoughts out. And sometimes it helps me to actually be focused on my thoughts. I do have a little bit of ADHD. So if I don't write it down, sometimes it's like, oh, don't forget to add apples to the grocery list. So journaling really keeps me really present with my thoughts. And I can kind of get to that underlying theme of, is it the role that's making me unhappy? Is it a boss? What's going on that I feel this unease or that's making me want to make this pivot? And then again, going back to having conversations, whether it's mentors, colleagues, any of that, just to really get those thoughts out and get some feedback. Oftentimes I've found, I project a lot, or I have these preconceived thoughts of like, I'm not good at X, right? And when I express that to someone, like, I'm concerned that I won't be good at this, a lot of times they're like, oh my gosh, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard. I think you'd be wonderful at it. And then they give me, backed up reasons as to why. And so sometimes, again, just getting outside of my own head, whether it's journaling or having those conversations with people, really help me to kind of reset, realign, and be like, okay, this is what I need to do. And it's doing that on repeat, right? It's not like I can get through this in 1 week. Sometimes these processes, like for these career pivots, I mean, they've taken me months to kind of get to the point where I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? And one of the biggest conversations that I'll suggest, again, you can only do it if you have a good HR team and good leadership, but having those conversations with your leaders, with your boss, with your HR team to say, I love my company. I want to stay here. I'm just not super happy in my role. What can we do together, right? Bring them along and see what ideas they have. And again, it might not be something that can happen overnight. But if they don't know your goals and they don't know what you're, trying to work towards, they can't help you.
I love it. Yeah. Being, someone mentioned this in the chat, being very vocal and upfront with maybe you're not posting on LinkedIn broadly, right? But having that conversation with people and letting them know that this is something that you're interested in, it opens that conversation. If they don't know, then they can't help, right? They think that you're very happy in what you're doing. And so I think that's really important, Courtney. Okay, so we've decided, or like we've identified some of the key crucial pieces for us. We know we want to make a career transition. We've kind of set some goals and built our toolkit, if you will. There's a couple questions in here, and this is going to be fun for me sitting in the talent acquisition seat. I'm going to flip it to you two to see what your perspective is, and I may weigh in on my thoughts here as well. But once you've actually decided or you're actually pursuing this, how do you get visibility around some of these career shifts when like it's not as obvious some of the work that you've done or the titles you've held for some of these career shifts, or you're interviewing and people are asking questions around like, how do you know this is what you want to do? You've never done this. So talk to me about navigating the recruiting process, either through your experience or what you would recommend for some of these folks as they transition into some of these career pivots. Either one of you want to take a stab at it first?
Yeah, I can go first. Again, I was just very, very honest and very intentional with, the story that I was telling, right? I focused on those transferable skills. And I also was very honest about the things that maybe I was lacking, right? I would come with a plan of like, this is how I intend to fill that gap. But I did not, if anything, I usually under promised my skills, right? Again, that's the type A person in me. But I find a lot of times, even when I was in my people leadership role, right? People come and you can tell that they're overselling. And then you're like, okay, can they do this at all? Or can they not do, like, absolutely do not have this skill and this is going to be a big problem? Whereas you could tell the people that were honest, right? Like, hey, I don't meet that bullet point, but it's something I'm interested in learning, and it's something that I'm studying for now. And one of the biggest things, again, as a people leader that I've experienced as well as personally, is showing people your genuine motivation, right? That you're a go-getter, you're excited about doing this, and that you have initiative. And I've found that having initiative sometimes goes so much further than actually having, a specific skill. They know that you can learn it, they see that you want it, and that sometimes has meant more for me, again, as a leader and individually, than that specific skill that I was gapping on.
Great perspective. Love that. Heather, anything you'd add there?
I would just add, like, get explicit about how your skills transfer. So as a person with a non-traditional background, I am super open to candidates who don't have like the same title coming into a role, the same industry experience, but I can make assumptions based on your resume of where I think you could be a fit. But if you can't tell me that this is where your experience fits to mine, I have to then assume that maybe you don't actually fit where I'm hoping your skills will transfer to. So I think be really clear about like, oh, in this role as whatever, I was doing X, Y, and Z, and that's how it aligns to, program management or being a project manager or whatever the transferable skills are. And I think that's also where you leverage your network. Talk to people in those roles, like even run down, like, this is what I think I'm going to say. Does this make sense in your industry? Get somebody who will be honest with you and be like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Or like, I understand it in your industry, but you're still not bridging the gap totally. Here's the words and phrases you should use. I think that's a really great way to leverage your connections. Because honestly, like, I used to hate like wanting to reach out and ask for help because I always had that impression of like, figure it out yourself. Don't make your problems other people's problems. But then I also love to help people. So I'm like, wait a minute. If I love to help people and I want people to ask me for help, I was like, why am I also not giving other people the opportunity to serve and help me too? So get comfortable being a little uncomfortable, but definitely get super clear on like, you have to be able to paint the picture of where your skills transfer. Because again, like not every hiring manager is going to see that for themselves.
Love it. You guys took the words right out of my talent acquisition mouth over here. And I think that would be the one piece I'm going to insert myself here for a second. I think that there is importance in understanding the terminology, understanding the words that are used in the industry, in the term, because to Heather's point, there are a lot of transferable skills across most industries and most roles. You just have to be sure that you can speak to them and that you can put them on paper. So someone specifically asked about like getting visibility with recruiters and ATSs. Using the right language is one of the key crucial ways to do that. And the other piece is, we talked about network. Reach out to those recruiters, reach out to the people at those organizations and say, hey, here is why I'm looking to make a career pivot. Here is how I think I fit the bill here. And also be open to feedback, to Heather's point of like, maybe there is a bit of a gap. And I can also tell you like, hey, totally agree that you meet 60% of this based on your transferable skills. Here are the things that are a bit of a gap that you should go and work on. And then we would love to see that kind of transition and be able to support some of that. So use the right language, reach out to folks directly. That would be my biggest advice. And then once you get to the actual interviews point, to Courtney and Heather's point, be able to speak to it and be confident, but not over pitch it, right, Courtney? Like there's a balance of, you haven't done the role before, so don't oversell yourself, but be confident enough in what you can bring to the table. It can be a beautiful balance there. So thank you both for weighing in on the talent acquisition questions we got there. That's perfect. Okay, so I know we've got about 15 minutes left, so I want to kind of step back to look at this holistic picture of this career pivot. What do you think, looking back, was the most important step you took that made this most successful, that made this work, in retrospect? Courtney, you want to start?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, again, having confidence in yourself. That's something that I've always struggled with. But when I look back, um, I really was, can I do this? I spent so much time worrying about if I could do it that I put so much energy into that, and I've been fine. Has it been stressful? Yes. Has it, it's had its ups and downs, but I've always gotten through it. So looking back, I would tell myself, like, you know, you have this, you can do this, you can do hard things, you've done hard things before. And just to have that confidence going into these and owning the decisions I've made.
I love that. Great, great perspective. Heather?
Yeah, it's definitely was choosing to believe in myself. I think some of it was really owning, like, even though my background was different, even though I never finished school, like, I used to regret that. I used to always think, like, oh, I didn't finish school, so I'm not as smart as everybody else here, or I'm not as good as everybody else at the table. But I think the weird effect of the imposter syndrome that I had was that I spent so much time learning just to try to feel like I belonged at the table, that at some point I realized I did belong at the table, and I had really good things to say based on my experience, based on the perspectives I had, and based on the understanding I got through learning. So I think I would really encourage people, like, especially if you are thinking about career pivots, spend time figuring out how you learn. If you can learn effectively and quickly, that's going to help you bridge any gaps that, like, you won't have all of the skills. Honestly, if you apply for a job and you're 100% qualified, you will be bored in 6 months, and you will be sitting there going, like, ugh, what's next for me? And sometimes there isn't a what's next. We have to be honest, in the current market right now, sometimes there isn't an opportunity to, like, move up to get that career advancement that you want as quickly as you hope to. So, like, finding ways to apply for jobs where, yeah, you meet maybe, 60% of the requirements, but there's still room for growth, and showing in the interview that you know how to learn effectively to close the gap. It can be really supportive kind of long term for your career success.
Fantastic. Fantastic advice. I love that. All right, I'm looking through the chat to see if we've got another question that we can tackle here. I love, someone used a word that is a Pluralsight thing, so I'm gonna ask it here. When you think about freelancing or upskilling, what types of things do you usually recommend to get started on some of this career pivot? Any ideas for the folks out here? Courtney, do you want to start?
The biggest thing I would say, right, is to find a medium that you can learn with, right? So if this is really hard, I'm very specific to Salesforce, or at least I am right now. And Salesforce has a really great community for learning, right? So I can go out there, I can follow trails, and I know that I'm a very hands-on person. And so I do the hands-on work. Also within my roles, and I've done this not even in my present one, I've always done this. If there is a skill that I want to learn, again, it goes back to forming those relationships. I've found a, mentor, right, to say, hey, I really want to learn how to do X, Y, and Z. The next time you're working on this, could I just, like, hop on a call and watch you and observe, right? Or I'll work with my boss and say, this is something I really want to learn. Can we carve out some time for me to try this? Because again, I'm a very hands-on learner, and until I try it, I don't know if I'm going to like it, if I'm going to succeed, if it's going to be something that's a stretch for me, right? Maybe that is a limit for me, and I'm like, yep, nope, can't comprehend that theory. I need to go back over here. So really trying to figure out, how do you learn, right? And then finding those websites, those career paths that you can kind of tap into it and say, okay, I'm going to try this out, and I'm going to set aside time, 15 minutes a day, an hour a week, to double click and learn.
Love that. Understanding your learning medium is something that is very overlooked, right? Everyone thinks, I'm going to recommend these 7 self-help books. Well, if you're not someone who learns that way, then it's just going to fall flat, or you're not going to get that out of it. So I love that advice, Courtney. Heather, what else?
Yeah, just adding on to that, it's a learning and development framework. So folks in the learning and development space would be familiar with this, but it's the concept of the 70-20-10, or sometimes people will call it the 3 E's of education, experience, exposure. The smallest fraction, that 10%, is really meant to be like formal education. So that's reading the books, going to college, getting a certification. The 20% is your social learning. So that's where you interact with other people. So maybe that is pair programming. If you're a tech person, it could actually be, like Courtney said, like getting on a call and, like, observing somebody and watching watching and like learning together. But the 70%, like the major part of your learning is the actual experience doing the thing. So it's like Courtney said, following the path, doing the stuff, learning it, hands on keyboard, or getting out there and volunteering and putting those skill sets to use. So you can, like, for some things, like you could freelance, sure. And if you can get paid a little bit of money, like awesome, do that. But also some of it could be like, could you go and offer that service in a nonprofit setting to community members who are disadvantaged and maybe just need that additional support? Like if you get in and you run a workshop and you realize, I hate running workshops, I hate being the center of attention, I don't like when people ask me questions, at least then you're not investing in, oh, I'm going to start a business and get an LLC and start freelancing. Like sometimes you can find ways to just test the waters and see if you want to go and invest in all that. Again, like how do you get to like the lowest level, smallest action you can take that's an actual action? I think that's something that's come up a lot for me, is like, how do you actually act on the information you have? Because as a deep overthinker, I can spend years thinking about the thing that I want to do, but until I actually do it, at that point, then suddenly you'll be like, oh, I love this or I hate it. And sometimes that makes the decision for you. So don't waste time like me overthinking for years. Just do the thing.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, right? Take it down the funnel, figure out, and we've talked about this a couple of times, but the overarching career pivot can feel very daunting to take that on, of like, I want to, I'm in this industry or I'm in this role and I want to be here. There's probably 50 steps to get you from there to there. And they're really small ones that can be really tactical, almost like to-do list things, Heather, right? So like find the small step that you can take, turn it into an actionable plan, and then it feels more achievable than just like this overwhelming, right turn that you've got to get to tomorrow. So I love that. All right. So Fairygodboss has a tradition, and they asked this question to all their panelists. So I'm gonna put the both of you on the spot for a second. We, as oftentimes as women, we don't feel comfortable enough bragging or taking ownership of some of the things that we achieve and that we do. We're not so great about talking positively about ourselves and the work that we do. So I would love for each of you to share with us an accomplishment. It can be personal or professional, something that you are most proud of, that you have achieved and that you've accomplished. Heather, why don't we start with you?
I love this. Yeah, I was one of those people who didn't want to talk about myself, didn't want to brag. I really fell under that whole thought process of like, if I just do a good job, somebody will recognize and I'll get, the kudos and the promotions and everything else. Not true. Because there will always be somebody else who has no problem speaking up for themselves. And that squeaky wheel is going to get the grease every single time. So there could be somebody significantly less qualified, less capable, like less effective, but they're in their boss's ear all the time saying, I'm amazing. I want that promotion. I'm going to leave if I don't get it. And if you are waiting, you're always going to get passed up by somebody else who is just louder than you. I think I've gotten really used to now sitting in the space of like, I'm actually really good at my job. Like, sure, I don't have the degree. I don't have the formal experience. I didn't work for a Big Four consulting firm, all of those things that I could let stop me. But the thing is, like, I understand that I am super self-reflective. I understand and own my own garbage. I am constantly learning. So even if there's something I don't know, I know how to solve for that learning gap. And also, like, I work really hard to be really good at what I do. And I need to own that, because the thing is, if I don't own that, who else is going to? Like, we can all hope to have an amazing boss who's going to mentor us and support us, but we are the only people at the end of the day responsible for our careers and our growth. Like, I spent so much of my early years just wishing someone would say, oh, here's the perfect job for you. Just go do this and you'll be happy. And what I realized is if I had just let somebody make that decision for me, I wouldn't be happy. But you have to get comfortable owning your stuff, both the good and the bad. Like, figure out, like, if there are stuff to improve on it. But the good stuff, like, own that. Women have done so many incredible things that are just overlooked. And sometimes they're intentionally hidden. Like, when you see those commercials, it's like all of the things in a car, if women's, inventions weren't there, it's like you don't have a rear view mirror, you don't have windshield wipers, like all the technology that like women have contributed to. Like, get comfortable owning what you're amazing at and find ways that feel authentic to you to talk about it. It doesn't have to be like, look at me, I'm amazing. But it can be just be willing to say, like, actually, I have experience in that. Let me tell you about what that looks like.
I love that. And while you didn't frame it in like the specific thing, this is what Heather did that she's accomplished, I think that in and of itself is the accomplishment, Heather. Like, getting yourself to a point where you are confident in what you're doing, you own what you're doing, you're willing to express that to your leaders, that in and of itself is a big step to take and to get to. So I love that example, and very inspiring too, to think about all of the things that women have contributed to that we just don't always take, credit for. I love that. Courtney, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, you guys definitely already touched on this, but not conforming to societal expectations, right? Everybody has a different expectation. Some people expect moms to be at home, right? Some people expect, or like, oh, you need to have this ginormous career and you need to be super successful in your career, right? Everyone has their expectation. And so again, I'm just proud of finding my balance, right? What I want to get out of life, what works for my family, and for being, kind of blocking out all of the other noise. Like, I think stay-at-home moms are amazing. I wish I could be one. God did not grant me with the patience to be a stay-at-home mom. I do not have the personality, unfortunately. But I am a good problem solver, right? But at the same time, I want to be present for my family. I want to enjoy time with my kids. I don't want to be a workaholic, right? And so finding that balance between those two things has been really hard for me, but I think I'm close to getting there. And just some of the most important work that I'll do in my life is in my home, and so that's really important to me to feel like I'm showing up there, that I'm not giving all of my energy at work, that by the time I clock out or I walk away from my computer, that I have nothing left to give my family. But at the same time, I really do enjoy working. I enjoy my job. And so finding that balance has been, one of the greatest things. And I just feel like most nights I go to sleep feeling like I've kicked butt at both. And that's my goal, is that I feel like I did great at work and that I was there for my family. And again, that only happened because I kind of figured out what my expectations were, where I wanted to be, not what everybody else wanted out of me.
I love that. Being able to identify what's important to you, realize that it doesn't have to be the same thing that's important to the person sitting next to you, and finding that balance that works, whether it's home life, whether it's kids, whether it's your pets, whether it's just yourself, and you have to prioritize your own mental health and your own mental well-being. I think that's a huge accomplishment, Courtney, and being able to find that balance and being self-aware enough to draw those boundaries for yourself and realize that, like, we all work, and it's also not our only quality, right? Like, that's not our only contribution to society here either. So I love that perspective. All right, last question that I've got for the two of you. I love this question. I know, actually, I'm going to ask two questions. I lied. There's one in the Q&A that we talked about that I want to go back to. Book or podcast recommendations. So lightning round. We've got two questions, very quick thoughts here. Okay. Lisa wants to know, we talked about books and podcasts and things that are helpful for you. One that you would recommend right now off the top of your head.
Think Again is the book that I legitimately think literally everybody needs to read, especially in the way that technology and the pace of work is changing. Like, Think Again is I don't care if you're a leader, an individual contributor, if you barely want to work, I absolutely recommend it. It's by Adam Grant. I think that book is fantastic and should be required reading. I love podcasts, and I have so many in my little thing. And of course, I don't remember any of them right now. I do think there's I don't know. Message me if you want. I will literally give you all of the podcast recommendations. I think Brene Brown has one actually around Dare to Lead, which I think is actually a great one to dig in as well, because she brings her perspective and the research she's done around shame and belonging. So I think that's the one that's coming top of mind. So I'm putting it out there.
Love it. Love it. Good one, Heather. All right, Courtney. I can see Courtney
I'm scrolling through my phone because
really quickly scrolling. All right, Courtney, lightning round.
I have all of these wonderful things. The Mel Robbins book. That's what I'm trying to find. What it is called? What did she just release? Oh my gosh.
Let them.
There you go. I kept thinking Let It Go, and I'm like, that is absolutely not it. I must have watched Frozen this week. I'm like, that is not it. Let Them. I really, really enjoyed that. And again, it talks about owning your space, letting people own their space, and kind of not taking on other people's baggage. So that was one that I just kind of recently read that I really, really loved and helped set good boundaries. So
I love it. She did say question for all three of you, Lisa, so I'm going to chime in here. This is a very old book. I think it was literally written in the 50s. So if you can step aside from some of the examples, like Realize Time and Place, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living is one of my favorite books I have ever read. As a type A perfectionist, realizing what I can control and what I cannot control. That book changed my life, both personally and professionally. So that would be I tell everyone that one. So, all right. I said 2 questions. We don't have time for our last one. I just want to say thank you so much, Heather and Courtney, and everybody who joined and asked such fantastic questions. Appreciate your perspectives and the discussion that we were able to have. As a reminder, we will send out the recording for today's event along with resources, opportunities at Pluralsight. And in the meantime, please feel free to check out Pluralsight's piece if you've got questions. There are jobs posted on Fairygodboss as well. We'd love to hear your feedback in the future. So there will be a type form tab on this screen if you've got 1 minute to give Fairygodboss a survey on how this went. Again, Heather, Courtney, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.